Hey everybody, and welcome back. My name is Sue and I'm from OML Embroidery, and welcome to my embroidery studio as well as my embroidery vlog. I decided I should start doing some of these. So in this vlog, I'm gonna update you on projects that we've been working on or I've been working on. As you can see, I've done the Lavender Brown Quilt. I'm very excited about it. Look at this. How beautiful is this quilt? It's really nice. So if those of you who don't know, this is for a present, and it's lavender brown. Don's oldest son is getting married, and his wife to be first name is Lavender, and she's marrying into Brown. Whether or not she changes her name, I don't know. But I kind of thought it was funny. She has a really good sense of humor, so I thought doing a quilt in lavender and brown would be awesome. And she loves bunnies, so I took the Benny Bunny collection from Anita Goodesign, and I picked some of the blocks. Those are the blocks here. And this is from a quilting collection. It's called Drunkard's Path, the style of it, and it's just perfect. And I just did simple. And this gorgeous border is from Beautiful Blocks and Borders, and this is fantastic. It is so pretty. It just makes the whole quilt. Remember I was telling you guys that? It just makes all the difference. So I have it together. I'm really, really happy with it. Now, obviously, I still have a little bit more work to do. I'm going to be a little shy, probably, of binding it. I'm not sure yet. I hope it's not going to be too bad. So I also wanted to show you guys how I sew the blocks together. And if you want to do embroidery quilting in the hoop, you kind of have to practice sewing the blocks together. And of course, the dreaded finishing. Nobody wants to do the finishing, including me. So it's a good idea to, learn and get more familiar with it. The better you sew your blocks together, the better the final design is going to be. So, it's worth practicing, and there's a way of doing it so you get everything to match up. This one's a pretty good example. The key points are here and here, and then of course the bottom lines. You don't want this out of whack either. So I made a little video to show you guys how I do the blocks, and hopefully it'll help you along with sewing blocks together. Pinning is the key. Let's check that out. Okay, so I have my quilt almost together, and I'm going to sew this last row on here. This is where it goes. So line it up, make sure everything is facing the right way. I have in fact sewed it upside down once before, so I always make sure I set it up like this, and then you fold it. It's always going to be right sides together. So now is the pinning, and this part is important, and you can do this on any block. Say for example like this, you really want these parts to line up properly. This one's a bit off, this one's good. You can see how it goes. It'll look better once I iron it. So figure out the important parts that you want to match up. So for these ones, they're kind of plain, there's nothing fancy, but I do want the lines to line up between the blocks. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick the corner and pick this corner. Now just one corner. That's where I start. Whichever side you want to start on, we could just as easily start on the other one. So a little awkward in the camera. So I'm finding it on the back of one and there, and it's right in the corner, so it's easy to do. You can see it on the back side well enough. and then make sure everything's laid out straight. I'm gonna move over a little bit so we're in the camera. And then I'm just gonna simply line this up here and through the back so the pin is straight and everything's straight. So pinning takes a little bit of time, but it just makes your final design easier, final stitching, and you want to match up stuff. So by the way, I highly recommend a pin thing like this. It's magnetic. It's lifesaver. So again, the important parts are the edges and these lines. So what I'm going to do is take them and I'll exaggerate it so you can see it better. So this is the line that we're going for. So you got to make sure that you know this one has a sashing on it and this one doesn't. So this is the line right here, and then on the top one they both have sashing. So we want to line these up perfectly. So I'm looking at the lines. I'll exaggerate it here for you. I'm looking at the lines and also the top lines. If I were to sew it together like this, look, we're going to be off. So two things, top and bottom and middle here. So I want to make it, and it's a little bit fiddly like I said, but it's worth the time. So this one, if you just kind of close it like this, you can see where the lines are. So that's pretty good there. So I'm holding it nice and tight, and I'm going to double check here. You can also, because this is Anita Goodesign, you can feel where the batting ends, and that designates the top of it. So I'm going to put a pin here, and it doesn't matter which side you pin from. I'm kind of doing it backwards so you guys can see what I'm doing better. I'm going to go in and double check my lines, and I'm going to double check my top lines, and that is actually pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. So there we go for that. Now I'm not going to worry about pinning the rest of it yet. I will in a minute. So again, let's look. We've got 2 sashings and 1 sashing. So this is my line, and this middle line is the other line. And it sits quite nicely. So when you're doing these blocks, even though the blocks are the same size, they're not always going to match up perfectly. And this is where pinning and taking your time will really help you out. Now, if you look down, you can see that my center lines are lined up properly. So I'm going to hold it like that and double check here. And that does look perfect. So I'm going to place a pin in here. Again, doing it backwards, but it doesn't matter. Try to keep your pins straight. And now let's do the other side. And we just want to double check our center line, and voila, make sure this one's okay. And again, I'm just pinning on the important parts. So if you're matching up flowers or trees, this is exactly how you would do it. And then at the end, I'm going to do the corner thing again. So stab right through the corner, right through this corner, and make sure they match. And that should be good. Kind of move it around a bit. I had a hard time getting that up there. And I want my pin straighter than that, so there we go. And just for a quick check, I double check on the edges. It's hard to see one of the lines because it's in perfectly matching thread, because we want those lines to line up too. Okay, so now we have the important parts stitched. You can kind of double check it, but it's pretty hard to see this way. So then now we want to put pins in the middle. So we are going to line up the top and bottom outlines, and there. And then put a pin in the middle. Very good. Do the same thing on the middle one. Doesn't matter how big your design is or how many blocks you are putting together. This is how I do it. Now there might be easier ways. I don't know, I'm not a sewist or anything, but this works for me. And I've done pretty well at it. So it's just practice. It's taken a while. It is a part of embroidery quilting, so it's not a bad idea to, you know, get good at it. Practice makes perfect. Now, you can leave it like this. It's not going anywhere. If you wanted to place a couple of pins extra, you could. You don't need to, though. This one, although it's kind of big, so we might need to. And before you pin, match it up. We don't want any movement when we're sewing. So yes, the bigger it is, the more pins I'm going to put in. And for just a couple blocks, I don't use quite this many pins, but I would like everything to line up. I think it looks much better. So it's not hard to do, but this is the important part. So this one is actually slightly off. So I'm going to fix that. And when you're putting the pins in, if the blocks don't match exactly, you can ease it all together, and that just means spread it out evenly over the block, and it will look fantastic once you stitch it. So there we go. Ironing is also a big part of it. I need to iron before I go to the next step, and I'm going to be putting the sides on it. So this is how I pin all my work, and it really makes a big difference. It's really nice when the blocks come together perfectly. You know, when you sew it, they don't have to perfectly match, but when you sew it. And that's how I do it. Now I'm gonna sew along. So the outside, it's hard to see. This one might be a little bit better. There's an outside line, and then there's one in between. So if you look at, let's look here. This is the outside line. So this is the outermost one. And we want to sew, we don't want to sew on this side of it, because then it's going to show when you turn it over. So we want to sew just inside. So generally there's a second line here. The second line is where the batting goes. It's just a little bit in. So you can sew in between the outside line and the batting line, or you can sew right on the batting line, maybe a little bit this way. As long as you're not on this side of it, then you'll be okay. But it happens that it shows, and I used contrasting colors on this one. Maybe not the best thing, but that, you know what, it's okay too. It makes it easier to see. And if I happen to wobble a little bit, you can go over it again or rip it out. I tend to just rip it out and start again. So those are your sewing lines, and it's really helpful. Get the right foot to use on it, and make sure you stick with the lines. So you're not going to worry about these lines, because as you can see, this is all uneven. You're going to worry about the lines that are already stitched. So once you get it pinned and matched, it's not too bad to do the stitching. So I'm just going to follow along here, and put this flat, probably, depending on which way I go. And I'm gonna lay this a little more flat. So I'm gonna move the needle up. I also check for that. It just makes it a lot easier. And I'm gonna stitch all the way across, and I'm going to use my center, I guess it's called a stitch in the ditch foot, and that just helps me line it up to exactly where I want it to be. So that's how I sew it together. So I'll come back with the finished quilt and I'll show you guys how it all comes together. For me, it works really well. I'm pretty much on most of the time. The pins are just saving me. And the stitching becomes a whole lot easier when it's pinned properly. You don't have to worry about it at all. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that.